A 23-year-old nursing student named Tami Odunsi, just days before her nursing school graduation, called her parents after finishing her final clinical shift. She walked up to her apartment door, and an argument with her roommate exploded into a lethal attack. She did everything right. She called the police, warned management, begged for help, and yet within minutes, her life was taken inside the very place that she should have been the safest. Today, we're going to talk about everything that happened, including what led up to today's story. And by the end of this video, you'll see exactly where the system broke, what justice looks like now, and why this tragedy never should have happened to Tammy. Welcome to the True Crime Nurse, everybody. My name is Kat, and I'm a registered nurse who loves all things nursing and true crime. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell before you go. All right, my friends, let's get into today's story. Elizabeth Tamilore, aka Tami Odunsi, was born on February 5th, 2002, and was raised in London, United Kingdom. She was a bright, compassionate young woman, and she knew that she wanted to be a nurse ever since she was a little girl. I can definitely relate to this. Tammy's family and friends describe her as a beautiful soul full of light, ambition, and kindness. She was actively involved in her Christian church community, and she actually found a lot of strength and joy in her faith. Her father, John Odunsi, said that she would never dare her to fly and that she had the most gentle, nurturing soul. She was very diligent and remaining focused on her studies, church, and family too. Tammy always dreamed of making a difference in people's lives, especially young lives. She had a passion for working with children and had always hoped to build a career to provide compassionate care to underrepresented communities. She was on her way to fulfilling those dreams before her life was stolen from her. At just 17 years old, Tammy made the courageous decision to move to the United States alone to pursue her dream of becoming a nurse. This was a huge leap of faith for someone that grew up in a really tight-knit family living in the United Kingdom. Tammy didn't let fear stop her, though. She made her way to Texas in late 2019, only a few months before the pandemic began, and this really shows you how brave and resilient Tammy was because she knew that she had to adapt to a new country and culture during one of the craziest times worldwide. Could you imagine moving out of the country, going through nursing school, which is incredibly challenging if you're not aware, without any local support system? She was so dedicated to her future and her dreams. Despite the challenges of living abroad and attending college during the world's most chaotic time, Tammy thrived. She enrolled at Texas Women's University, or TWU, which is a school that is actually well known for its nursing program, and she was a standout student by both her peers and her professors. At TWU, Tammy excelled academically. She was on track to receive her Bachelor's in Science of Nursing this spring of 2025, and she had completed all of her coursework and her clinical training. The university said that Tammy was one of the best students in her program, and let me tell you from firsthand experience, that's not easy to do. Some of the most intelligent, hardworking students end up in nursing school, so to stand out amongst your peers is a major accomplishment. Outside of classes, she also posted on TikTok, and her handle was at Tammy Dollars if you want to look her up, but I'll insert a few videos that I downloaded. She posted about her journey as a British student nurse in America, sharing tips and study guides, day in the life vlogs, and a lot of really high quality motivational content about achieving her goals someday. Over time, she grew a pretty significant following of over 30,000 followers by April 2025, which then doubled to almost 60,000 in the weeks following what happened to her after it went public. Her final video, posted just 5 days before she died, showed her counting down to graduation, vacation, and summer. This post really broke my heart because you can tell how excited Tammy was to graduate and finally start working as a nurse. By April 2025, Tammy was truly at the finish line of her nursing program. She completed her final clinical rotation and was only days away from her commencement ceremony. For those of you that don't know, clinicals are when nursing students go out to hospitals or other healthcare sites or locations to train and sort of learn in the environment prior to graduating so that you're comfortable when you start. These hours are grueling alongside studying, exams, and board prep, and anyone that's been through nursing school knows how difficult it is. So to know that Tammy finished all of her clinical rotations but wasn't able to walk across that stage is so unfair and devastating. Her family was so incredibly proud of her, and her father even packed his suitcase, preparing to fly to Texas for her graduation ceremony on May 3rd. Tragically, Tammy didn't make it to graduation. Instead, her family's final interaction was with her in a frantic phone call filled with fear, followed by the sounds of her desperate cries for help. The promising life of a loving daughter, devoted sister, and compassionate friend was stolen in just an instant. To understand how this catastrophe came to pass, we need to talk about the person that Tammy was forced to share her home with during her final months, and that was her roommate, Chester Grant. Chester Grant is the 40-year-old man that's accused of murdering Tami Odunsi. Grant is an American who lived in the state of Washington before he moved to Texas, and prior to moving, he had a criminal record of domestic violence incidents and violations. According to court records, Grant had at least 2 prior domestic violence-related incidents in Washington, one of which was a felony. Grant's age and background made him a highly unlikely candidate to be living with someone that's 23 years old in college, but somehow that is exactly what happened. In early 2025, Grant came to Houston, Texas. Grant was reportedly a student at Fordham University in New York. It's possible that Grant was enrolled in an online program or had some kind of affiliations that qualified him to be a student, despite him being 40 years old and geographically located in Texas at the time. But this is how he gained access to student housing in Houston, and that's where he would end up sharing the same residence with Tammy. The unfortunate living situation that brought Tammy and Grant together was facilitated by a Houston-based company called For a Place to Live. This business is a student housing provider, and they offer off-campus accommodations to students living in the area near their college. In early 2025, Tammy relocated to Houston specifically to finish her nursing clinicals at the Texas Medical Center, and she needed a short-term place to live near Houston, so For a Place to Live matched her with an available room. This is relatively common in college if you didn't know. 2 months before her death, For a Place to Live paired Tammy and Grant together as roommates in a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom at 6510 Goforth Street in Southeast Houston. Each of them had their own private bedroom and bathroom, but they shared a kitchen and a common area. They signed separate leases for their individual rooms, meaning that Tammy did not choose Grant as a roommate. He was assigned by the housing company to fill the other room in that unit. For a Place to Live advertises that it conducts background checks on all applicants using a third-party service called Safe Rent Solutions to screen potential tenants. In Grant's case, the screening process clearly failed. Company policy, as stated on its website, was that if an applicant had questionable items in their background suggesting that they might not be a fit for shared housing, then they would be required to rent a private unit instead. And yet somehow Grant, a 40-year-old man with multiple prior arrests for violent offenses, was approved to move in with 23-year-old Tammy. According to a lawsuit later filed by Tammy's family, Grant's out-of-state criminal record was either missed altogether or blatantly ignored by both For a Place to Live and Safe Rent Solutions. The family's attorneys demonstrated how easily Grant's past could have been discovered in just an easy Google search, and I myself did this, and a ton of things came up in Washington for him. The background check that For a Place to Live received showed nothing indicating any history of violence. How? Whether this happened due to negligence or error, the system that is meant to protect tenants like Tammy utterly failed to do so. Tammy focused on her clinical rotations and studies, spending long hours at the hospital and the library. The significant age gap between the two of them at 17 years and being in completely different stages of life may have also caused some friction, but initially nothing major happened until their pets became an issue. Now, I did find conflicting reports about how many pets there were in the apartment, but it seems that both Tammy and Grant did have a cat in the apartment. I did double check multiple sources, and when I went through Tammy's TikTok account, I did see a cat on her page, so we're gonna go with Tammy also having a cat of her own as well. With a mixture of roommates and animals, it's easy to have arguments over cleaning litter boxes, pets damaging each other's property, eating their food, or one cat not getting along with the other, but tensions over the cats came to an ugly head. On April 18th or 19th of this year, which was about a week before the murder, an incident occurred that in hindsight was a major red flag for apparent danger. Grant's cat became the source of an argument between Grant and Tammy. Grant knocked Tammy's phone out of her hand and splashed some unspecified liquid onto her. He also issued a death threat to Tammy, telling her that he could or would kill her. Think about how terrifying that must have been for her. This was an aggressive outburst from a much older man, and she was trapped into living with him. She responded exactly as she should have by immediately seeking help from the authorities and management. On that day, Tammy called the Houston Police Department to report the incident. HPD officers responded to the apartment, and neighbors later confirmed that police were seen on site breaking up a fight between the two roommates. Police records show that an incident report was filed when they came out for this altercation. However, no arrests were made at that time and no charges were filed against Grant. This report hasn't been made public, so unfortunately, we don't have all the answers of that situation, or details, I should say, as to why, but I have a really hard time understanding how an arrest was not made that night. An assault and threat were involved in this altercation. Let me know what you think in the comments about this down below. Feeling frustrated that the police didn't help her, Tammy then brought the issue to housing management. She contacted a property manager at For a Place to Live that very same night, reporting that she felt very unsafe living with Grant and she wasn't comfortable continuing to do so. Do we blame her? According to her family's later lawsuit, Tammy urgently communicated the seriousness of this situation, warning the landlord that her roommate had threatened to kill her and begged for them to step in. The property manager's response was to schedule a meeting to address the conflict between all parties involved. Tammy arranged for this meeting to include her parents, who would call in from London or maybe be on video, and a representative of the housing company would also be present. The meeting was set for April 26, 2025, the very day that would end up being her last. Tammy must have been holding out for hope that this meeting would hopefully bring some resolution between them, and hope that maybe the landlord would move Grant out or at least set firm rules to keep her safe, but that meeting never happened. On April 26th, the property management abruptly canceled the meeting and did not reschedule it. No specific reason for that cancellation has been made public, but this cancellation meant that Tammy was left on her own that day, once again with a volatile roommate still present, and now even angrier since the police had been involved. Now, I want to add that it did come out later on that on the morning of April 26th, the day after the fight, an employee from For a Place to Live did stop by to make a brief visit to the property. The landlord later released a statement acknowledging that they did visit the unit on the morning of April 26, which was a Saturday, and during this visit, they spoke with Tammy, who told them all about the argument with Grant and confirmed that the police had responded the night before. The landlord attempted to speak with Grant as well, but he didn't respond to their request, so they left a written note for him at the time at the property. After this, the landlord left. No further action was taken at the time because they didn't see this as an immediate crisis, and the scheduled group meeting for that day was canceled. This was a fatal mistake. Saturday, April 26, 2025 was supposed to be an important day for Tammy. This was the day that she had completed her final clinical shift for nursing school. We know from her family that Tammy had a routine of calling her parents every day after clinicals, and this day was no different for her. After wrapping up, Tammy was heading home to her apartment and called her parents in London. She told them all about her day and expressed the fear that she had of Grant, and she was on high alert given what had just happened. Her mother, Tami Odunsi, later shared that during that call, Tammy was highly anxious about seeing Grant when she got home. As Tammy approached her apartment door, which was sometime in the afternoon of April 26, she discovered something bizarre and disgusting. Someone had defecated in her shoes that were left outside of her door. It was a deliberate act of hostility and humiliation, and Tammy immediately suspected that it was Grant. Still on the phone with her mother, Tammy was understandably angry. Her mother heard Tammy confront Grant, asking, "Why did you do this?" What happened next was every parent's literal worst nightmare. Over the speakerphone, Adenike suddenly heard her daughter's voice erupt into screams. Tammy cried out several times for help, and then the line went completely quiet. In just seconds, a normal phone call turned into hearing her daughter's murder. I cannot imagine hearing this, especially being so far from being able to help your own child. It's just absolutely horrifying. Although Tammy's parents were an ocean away, they acted quickly to do whatever they could to help her. John Odunsi called a friend in Houston and told him about the emergent situation that happened. He was desperate and he didn't even know where to begin to try to help his daughter. This friend understood the gravity of the situation and immediately called local authorities to request a welfare check at Tammy's address. At approximately 3:50 p.m. on April 26, Houston Police Department patrol officers arrived at the apartment complex on Goforth Street to perform that welfare check. Upon arrival, officers knocked on the door of Tammy's unit and got no answer. The apartment was eerily silent. However, officers quickly noticed blood on the rear concrete patio of the unit. The presence of blood outside indicated that something terrible had to have happened inside, and it gave officers cause to enter without a warrant. They made entry into the apartment, and what they found was horrifying. Inside, the officers encountered a brutal scene. In the kitchen, they found Elizabeth Tami Odunsi lying on the floor in a pool of blood with multiple stab wounds covering her body. The young woman had been viciously attacked and showed no signs of life. Houston Fire Department paramedics quickly assessed Tammy and pronounced her dead on scene. She had likely succumbed to her injuries very quickly, which we will dig into a little more later on. Meanwhile, police discovered another person in the apartment. Chester Grant was found in his bedroom alive but badly injured with at least one stab wound to himself. He was barely conscious and bleeding profusely. Initially, responders were unsure if Grant's wound was maybe a result of Tammy stabbing him or self-inflicted, but evidence quickly pointed to Grant doing this to himself. Detectives on scene observed that Grant's injuries appeared consistent with self-stabbing. Grant stabbed himself 6 times, including once to the neck, in an effort to take his own life after stabbing Tammy. Despite these serious wounds, Grant did not succeed. Thankfully, because he needs to pay for what he did. Officers immediately sent him to the hospital for treatment. Grant was rushed to a nearby hospital in critical condition for emergency surgery and care. Meanwhile, police secured the apartment as a crime scene, and homicide detectives from HPD were called in to investigate the homicide of Tami Odunsi. Yellow tape went up around the quadplex as forensic teams began processing the evidence. The blood trail on the back patio indicated that either Grant had gone outside, maybe to try to escape, or had collapsed there at some point, or that Tammy maybe had attempted to flee out of the back door during the attack. These details haven't been shared in public reports, but the presence of blood outside implies movement during the attack by at least one of them. These details will be clarified during the trial, though. Officers canvassed the area and spoke with neighbors, and they quickly learned that there had been a police call to the very same unit the night before. Neighbors talked about hearing arguments and even a physical fight between Tammy and Grant just the day before this happened. This information, combined with the scene, made the situation pretty clear-cut to investigators, so they determined that the roommate was really the only and prime suspect. There was no sign of forced entry or third-party involvement anywhere to argue anything else. All evidence pointed directly at Grant. Back in London, the Odunsi family received the confirmation of what they had feared. Their beloved Tammy was gone. John Odunsi said, quote, "We packed the suitcases and everything, and now the excitement for her graduation has evaporated. We don't know how to get over it," end quote. His wife was so traumatized that she couldn't sleep and would wake up crying in the middle of the night. The horror of hearing Tammy's last moments would replay in their minds endlessly. For Houston police, though, their work was just starting. Investigators who processed the apartment at Go For Straight documented a scene of extreme brutality. The kitchen, which again is where Tammy's body was found, was the primary location of the attack. There was a significant amount of blood in there, given the number of stab wounds that she had suffered. Detectives noted that Tammy had appeared to have been stabbed more than 24 times, which was later confirmed to be 28 stab wounds. While the full autopsy report hasn't been publicly released just yet, officials did share some key findings. Tammy was stabbed 28 times with a sharp object, which they're assuming is to be some kitchen knife. The injuries were concentrated to her torso and neck area. Defensive wounds or cuts on her arms and hands weren't talked about in the news release, but it's likely that she had some because most victims of a knife attack really always try to protect themselves by putting their arms up. The sheer number of wounds suggests that Tammy fought desperately for her life. Her official cause of death was listed as a homicide by sharp force injuries. The suspect's blood was also part of the scene. Grant's 6 self-inflicted stab wounds meant that he also was bleeding significantly, and investigators found blood leading to the bedroom where Grant had been found and some on the back patio. The shoes that were filled with feces mentioned by Tammy's mom were also a key piece of evidence that explained what led to this attack. Now, remember, police had Grant hospitalized, so surgeons were intervening to treat his wounds and try to save his life. The fact that detectives specified 6 stab wounds, including one to the neck, indicates that they had spoken to the doctors or at least reviewed Grant's medical records once he was stable. These severe wounds emphasize how determined Grant was to no longer be here after realizing the gravity of what he'd done, because a stab wound to the neck can certainly be fatal. And based on what I read, it is surprising that he survived this wound. Within hours of the discovery, Houston police had secured the scene and gathered some initial statements. The welfare check call, the mother's frantic account of what she'd heard on the phone, and the prior police visit all provided a clear picture that Grant was the assailant. It was solidified that this was not a random crime or home invasion. It was a roommate conflict that had turned deadly over his cat. Investigators also pulled records of Grant's background. When they ran his name, they discovered his extensive out of state criminal history. He had had multiple arrests in Washington and a recent conviction for violating a protective order. This would later be used by prosecutors to argue that he was a danger to the community, but for now, it confirmed to Houston police that their suspect was and is extremely violent. Chester Lamar Grant was considered stable from his injuries and was discharged from the hospital on May 2nd. As soon as he was released, he was charged with murder in connection with Tami Odunsi's death. Under Texas law, murder is a first-degree felony carrying anywhere between 5 to 99 years or life in prison and a $10,000 fine. Because this case doesn't meet the conditions for capital murder like multiple victims or a concurrent felony, the death penalty is not on the table, so Grant faces life in prison if convicted. Are you as surprised as this by I am, especially with knowing that this took place in Texas? Let me know in the comments down below. Grant's first court appearance took place on May 5th, 2025, followed by an arraignment. Bail was set to $500,000 because of his brutal and violent behavior towards others and to himself. As of now, so October 2025, there is no trial date that's been set. One thing we do know, though, is that Grant pleaded not guilty. Can you believe that? Grant remains in custody at the Harris County Jail and will remain there until after the trial. Frustrated by how preventable Tammy's death was, her family filed a $65 million wrongful death lawsuit in July of 2025. This targets 4 main defendants. First is For a Place to Live, who is the student housing company that placed Grant with Tammy in the first place. Second is Safe Rent Solutions, who is the contractor responsible for Grant's background check or lack thereof. Third is the landlord or property owner of the rental property. And last but certainly not the least is Chester Lamar Grant for the murder of their daughter. This lawsuit accuses all of the parties involved of gross negligence, arguing that better screening, responsiveness, and action absolutely could have prevented Tammy's death. Improper screening resulted in negligence when Safe Rent, allegedly, failed to uncover Grant's prior domestic violence record, which anyone can find in a simple online search, and it would come up, and I did the same thing. Ignored warnings also resulted in negligence when Tammy had repeatedly reported that she felt unsafe, including a prior incident where Grant had physically assaulted her. After this, that critical April 26th meeting about her safety was just canceled hours before her murder. Failure to act on known danger resulted in negligence because despite police involvement and all the clear signs of escalation, the property managers took no action to separate or relocate the tenants. At a press conference on July 8, 2025, attorneys Jonathan Cox and Troy Pradia talked about the negligence, calling the placement of a violent 40-year-old with a 23-year-old nursing school student unconscionable. They stressed that Tammy did everything right by asking for help multiple times, and that is what haunts me the most about today's case. The Odunsi family is seeking compensation for wrongful death damages, including loss of life, companionship, and future income, and survival damages covering Tammy's suffering before death. They also cited emotional distress as her parents heard the attack live over the phone, and this is an extreme trauma that the suit highlights under Texas law. The family has also made it very clear that this lawsuit is about accountability, not money, and they hope to force policy changes that will prevent future tragedies like this from happening again to anybody. At the lawsuit announcement, Tammy's sister Georgina and father John talked about their devastation and calling for justice. Georgina said Tammy was the glue that held their family together, while John talked about the horror of hearing the murder in real time, calling it pain beyond words. Although he expressed frustration with the police's response, the family didn't even try to sue the Houston Police Department. So far, the housing company and Safe Rent have not publicly commented on what happened to Tammy. The landlord previously issued a statement expressing sympathy, but claimed that both tenants had passed their background checks and that no signs of violence ever appeared in the reports, suggesting that the screening company may bear more responsibility about what happened than them. Pointing fingers doesn't sound like accountability to me, though. Texas Women's University mourned the loss of Tammy, too. TWU released a statement expressing deep sorrow at Tammy's death by saying, quote, "We were deeply saddened to learn of the tragic death of Texas Women's University student Elizabeth Tami Odunsi. Our campus community mourns her loss, and we send our heartfelt condolences to her family and friends," end quote. The university emphasized how Tammy, motivated by love and purpose, was determined to become a compassionate caregiver for others, especially for those in need. They talked about her bravery in moving from London to Houston alone at only 17 and how she overcame challenges, quickly becoming an inspiration to everyone on campus. In May of 2025, at the commencement ceremony that Tammy was supposed to participate in, her name was called and she was recognized as a graduate of the College of Nursing. Tammy's older sister, Georgina, walked across the stage to accept Tammy's Bachelor of Science in Nursing diploma and nursing pin on her behalf. Georgina was accompanied by their two brothers, and together the siblings stood in front of Tammy's classmates to receive her certificate and say a few words. The auditorium of students and faculty erupted in applause during this emotional tribute. Georgina later shared a video of the moment on social media, captioning it, "Forever our sister's keeper." She then said, quote, "Walking across that stage to accept Tammy's diploma was the hardest thing I've ever done. She should have been there, proud and radiant. Instead, I carried the weight of her absence and the pain of what was taken from our family," end quote. It was so bittersweet for them to be celebrating Tammy's achievement while also mourning her absence, and this made me really emotional.
6 weeks until I graduate nursing school. 5 weeks till I graduate. 4 weeks till I graduate, and I just got my nursing stove. We have 2 more weeks.
Tammy's family, with the help of an outpouring of community support, arranged to bring her back home to the UK for her burial. A GoFundMe fundraiser was launched within days of her death to help cover some of those costs to bring her body back to London and pay for the funeral expenses. The response was incredible. The initial goal was set at £40,000 by May 4th, and it had reached $54,000, which is about $72,000, and by mid-May, it had exceeded £75,000. Hundreds of people contributed with so many touching messages, including followers of hers on TikTok that had also been impacted by her positivity. Tammy's body was flown back to the UK in late May 2025. Her funeral was held in London, where family and friends paid their respects. Details of the service were kept private, but the family later shared that they were able to give her the peaceful and dignified farewell that she deserves, burying her in her homeland surrounded by everybody that she loves. The pain of loss was and still is completely indescribable for them. I'm going to insert a video if I can, but Georgina shared that Tammy was buried in a beautiful hot pink coffin wearing her graduation dress.
My sister is currently in her bright pink coffin in her beautiful beige graduation dress. She's got a 13x6 lace frontal on with loose beach curls, a fresh set of French tip nails, and she indeed looks beautiful, as she always has been.
It's so clear that her family adores her, and you can really see that in how intentional they were by making sure that she would rest in the same beautiful way that she lived. I want to add that an incredible nurse that I used to work with and several doctors came from Nigeria. If there is anything that I've learned from them, besides being the most kind, selfless people I've ever met, it's that taking care of their community and family means everything to them. I'm going to add some screenshots or clips here, but Tammy never lost sight of those values, and I'm sure that her parents instilled this in her. Every time Tammy shared on social media about her dream of becoming a nurse, it was so that she could take care of her family when she was making money. I'm just so heartbroken and angry for Tammy and her family that they were robbed of all the beauty that she was giving to the world. She was at the finish line after all the hard work, and I know that she would have been an amazing nurse. The murder of Elizabeth Tami Odunsi is a heart-wrenching story of a bright life that was cut short by senseless violence. Tammy did everything society asks someone to do in danger. She reported threats to the police, informed her landlord, involved her family, sought to resolve the conflict, and yet the systems in place to protect her collapsed when it mattered the most. The result was that a young woman who was just days away from achieving her dream became the victim of a brutal homicide in what should have been the safety of her own home. I'm sending Tammy and her family all the prayers and my love, and I will be closely following today's case. Thank you, Sandra, for today's case recommendation. The more that I dug into this case, the more I understood exactly why you suggested it. And thank you all for spending time with me today and listening to today's story. I know that this story was a little shorter than our usual video, but this really got to me. So I decided that I couldn't wait for the autopsy to come out or the trial. So you can definitely expect a follow-up video on Tami Odunsi's case. Next week's video is going to be a much deeper dive, so stay tuned. I hope that you all have a beautiful week and do loads of self-care. Nurses orders. I'll see you next weekend. Bye.